The morning came heavy and sharp, the kind of October morning where the cold doesn't just sit outside, but creeps into your bones and stays there. Harrisburg was still quiet, the streets covered with a thin layer of frost, and I could see my breath even inside the house. That chill reminded me of my age in a way nothing else could. 71 years may not sound too old to some, but when every step makes your joints crack and every morning begins with an ache, you feel it. You carry it. Life spent behind a desk at the First National Bank of Harrisburg had worn me down. In its own quiet way. 32 years of long hours, endless numbers, stacks of reports, and late evenings had taught me two truths I never forgot. People can't always be trusted, and money, if not guarded carefully, disappears like sand through. Fingers. My name is Edith Winters. I have been Edith Winters for most of my life, wife, mother, widow. I've been alone for 20 years now, ever since my Harold passed. He left me with a house, a modest savings, a battered but dependable car, and one son who has long since stopped feeling like my son. Harold and I bought this house on Oak Street back in the 1970s. A simple two-story with white siding, a neat little garden, and a garage that still smells faintly of the oil stains Harold left behind. That house is all I have left of him. The garden he once tilled now grows roses I planted in his memory, and in the garage sits the 6-year-old Toyota he bought me before he died. A car I treat like a living thing because it feels like his last gift. Every day begins in the same quiet ritual: my cup of strong black tea, a slice of toast with peanut butter, and the comfort of my day planner. Retired though I may be, I still record every bill, every purchase, every small expense and piece of income. Some call it habit, others a professional quirk. But for me, it's a kind of discipline, a way to remind myself that I still have order in a life where so much has gone out of my control. This morning was no different. I flipped through yesterday's neat notes, the numbers written in my careful hand, and muttered aloud. Weber said he'd come by this weekend. With Tabitha. I paused. What is it they'll want this time? Weber is my only child, born late in life when Harold and I thought children had passed us by. I was nearly 47 when I held him in my arms for the first time. He was a sweet boy back then, with bright, curious eyes and a knack for returning home with his knees scraped from climbing trees or falling off his bicycle. That sweet boy is long gone. At 49, he has turned into a heavyset man with a bald spot and a belly to match. He works as an insurance claims inspector, and though he earns enough for a comfortable life, he walks around as if the world owes him more. The real change came when he married Tabitha. 15 years ago, Weber brought her home like a prize, a receptionist at some fancy dental clinic where he'd gone for work on his teeth. Their wedding was modest, a town hall ceremony and a reception at a local restaurant that I paid for. I remember her bright smile that day, her sweet voice calling me Mommy, and her promises to look after my precious boy. If I close my eyes, I can still see it. But that smile did not last. The first cracks in our relationship appeared within a year. The visits became less about family and more about finances. Conversations turned again and again to the house, the car, the savings I had carefully tucked away. Mum, you should think about rewriting the house deed, Weber told me once during dinner, pretending it was about taxes and legalities. If something happens, it'll be better for us all. Tabitha leaned in with that silky smile of hers, and added, Nobody lives forever, Edith. Better to settle things now before there's trouble later. Their words became a constant hum, at first twice a year, then every few months, then nearly every time they visited. I knew that tone. I had seen enough greedy sons and daughters at the bank during inheritance disputes to recognize it immediately. They weren't worried about me. They were circling, waiting for what they believed was theirs. Setting my teacup aside, I walked to the front window. Across the street, I saw my neighbor and only real friend, Myrtle Landor. At 68, Myrtle still had more energy than most people half her age. She'd worked as a telephone operator for years and seemed to know every secret in Harrisburg, carrying town gossip like other women carry handbags. She was sweeping up the fallen leaves, her broom clattering against the sidewalk. When she noticed me, she lifted her hand. "Edith, come out here. The weather's too lovely to waste." I stepped onto the porch, grateful for her presence. Myrtle crossed over, leaning on her broom as if it were a walking stick. "Did Weber call yesterday?" she asked, sharp as always. "Yes," I sighed. "They'll be here Saturday." Myrtle snorted. "What do they want this time? Are they trying to shove you into their house again? More like into a nursing home," I muttered bitterly. I still remembered the glossy brochure Tabitha had left on my table last visit, as if I wouldn't notice. "Sun Valley," I told Myrtle. Her face twisted in disgust. "That place? Edith, my cousin worked there." She said the residents sit in wheelchairs lined up in the hallway, staring at the wall. Not living, just waiting to die. "You can't let them push you into that." "I already know," I said softly. "I've read every review. I've looked at every home in the county. Sun Valley isn't the worst, but it isn't where I want to end my life." Myrtle put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Then what will you do?" "I have a plan," I whispered, glancing at my watch. "I'm meeting Aldrich today. It's time to finalize everything." Her brows lifted. "Aldrich Pierce, the lawyer?" I chuckled. "Myrtle, please. He's 75. We've been friends since high school. Harold trusted him with everything. He's family." "Nothing wrong with friends at our age," Myrtle said with a sly wink before heading back to her house. Once she left, I returned indoors. In my bedroom, behind a painting, I kept a safe. I pulled out a thick file and opened it, my hands brushing across the papers I'd carefully prepared. As I sorted through the pages, memories washed over me. I remembered the first time Weber introduced Tabitha to us, almost 16 years ago. Harold had been alive then, but already fading. We were sitting in the backyard, Harold in his rocking chair, me making lemonade. Weber walked in, tall and proud, with a slender blonde by his side. "Mom, Dad, this is Tabitha," he announced. Shook Harold's hand with that dazzling smile that later Harold whispered to me when we were alone. "Edith, that woman sees our son as a wallet, nothing more. Trouble will follow." My husband had been right. After he passed the next year, Weber married her quickly, and from that moment on, my boy began to slip further and further away from me. The last truly warm conversation we had was about 8 years ago, when Weber showed up alone. He sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and admitted, "Mum, we're trying to have a baby, but the doctors say there may be problems." For one small moment, I saw my boy again, vulnerable, in need. I hugged him. But even then, Tabitha's shadow loomed. "She says if we do have a baby, you'll have to help us financially," he added. And just like that, the moment was gone. The talk turned back to money. They never had a child. And after that, Weber's voice on the phone grew colder, shorter, and full of impatience. I closed the file with a sigh. Then the doorbell rang. On the porch stood Aldrich Pierce, tall, grey-haired, still sharp in his tweed suit despite his 75 years. His beard was neatly trimmed, his brown eyes shrewd and kind. He leaned down to kiss my cheek. "Edith, darling, you look beautiful as ever." "Flatterer," I teased, smiling as I led him to the kitchen. "Come in. I made your favorite tea." Aldrich had been our friend since high school, and one of the finest estate lawyers in Harrisburg before. He retired. He was the one who helped Harold and me buy this house all those years ago. Now, he was the one helping me protect it. He settled at the table, pulling a folder from his briefcase. I've reviewed everything. The paperwork is ready. Edith, are you certain you want to do this? I poured the tea, my hands steady. More than certain. I know where this road is heading. They won't stop until they have everything I've got. But it's your son, Aldrich said gently. Maybe if you spoke openly. No, I interrupted. Weber is not Weber. Anymore. He listens only to Tabitha now. Every time they visit, they look around this house like vultures, already deciding what's worth keeping and what's worth selling. Talking to him is useless. Aldrich studied me for a long moment, then sighed and opened the folder. Very well. First, I prepared a power of attorney that ensures if you become incapacitated, I not Weber will be in charge of your affairs. Perfect. I nodded firmly. And here is the updated will. The majority of your assets will go into a trust. You'll receive a steady monthly allowance for the rest of your life, no matter where you are. And the house, yes, the house will also go into the trust, but with a stipulation. You will have the right to live here until the day you die. After that, the property will be sold, and the proceeds distributed exactly as you've instructed. I leaned back, satisfaction warming me more than the tea. The plan was airtight. Weber and Tabitha would receive nothing more than the small amount the law demanded. I leave my only son. No house, no savings to drain, no control over my life. I took a deep breath, my voice calm but firm. What about the receipts? I asked, pulling a stack of papers out of my folder. Aldrich looked through them and whistled. Impressive. There's almost $40,000 worth here. All signed by Weber, yes. For the last 10 years, every time asked to borrow money, I made him sign a receipt. Of course, he didn't think I'd ever ask for the money back. That he's legally obliged to return it when you ask for it, nodded Aldrich. Clever, Edith. Very clever. We spent another 2 hours discussing the details of the plan. When all the documents were signed and notarized, Aldrich had thoughtfully brought a notary who was waiting in the car. I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I was prepared for any turn of events. Thank you, I said as I walked Aldrich through the door. I don't know what I would have done without you. He took my hand and looked into my eyes. Edith, you were always the cleverest of us all. Even at school, you were the fastest at solving problems. He was quiet. It's a shame about Weber. Harold would have been disappointed. Harold saw it coming. I replied quietly. Remember how he always said Weber was too easily influenced? Aldrich nodded and suddenly asked, what if they tried to act more decisive? What if they tried to prove that you were incapacitated? I smiled, pulling a small tape recorder out of my pocket. I've been recording every conversation I've had with them for the last 2 years. I have proof that I'm sane, and they're only interested in my assets. Aldrich laughed and shook his head. You're incredible, Edith Winters. They don't know who they're messing with. After he left, we went back to the kitchen and sat looking at the phone for a long time. Weber was supposed to call today to confirm his weekend visit. I knew it wouldn't be a routine visit. Something told me they were preparing for drastic action. The phone rang at 7:00 p.m. sharp. I picked it up with the recorder on. Mum, it's Weber. Tabitha and I will be there Saturday afternoon. He hesitated. We're going to have an important conversation about your future. Of course, son, I said calmly. I want to talk to you about the future too. Yours and mine. I hung up without waiting for an answer. I felt the storm coming, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready for it. Saturday brought not only the promised visit from my son and daughter-in-law, but also the first real chill of fall. I woke up early despite a sleepless night. Thoughts of the upcoming meeting kept me awake. The hands of the clock showed 7 in the morning when I was already standing in the kitchen automatically preparing a casserole. Weber's favorite dish since childhood. You know they don't want your casserole, I muttered under my breath, cracking eggs into a bowl. They want your house. It's strange how quickly you get used to talking to yourself when you live alone. Sometimes I think my voice is the only thing that breaks the oppressive silence of these rooms. The rooms they want to evict me from. The doorbell rang at 11:30 sharp. Tabitha was always punctual. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to answer the door, trying to keep a calm expression on my face. Mum. Weber leaned over to kiss me on the cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and something else. Anticipation. You look wonderful. Hello, Edith. Tabitha handed me a bouquet of flowers and a bag of fruit. We decided to make you happy with fresh oranges. Vitamin C is especially important at your age. At my age, she never missed an opportunity to remind me of my years, as if I could forget how old I was. Come on in, I gestured for them to come inside. I made casseroles and tea. Oh, Mom, you didn't have to bother, Weber said. But his eyes were already searching the hallway. Have you changed anything here? No, it's just as it was, I replied, watching Tabitha take off her expensive coat. It must have cost more than I'd spent on clothes in 3 years. We walked to the kitchen and I started pouring tea. My hands were shaking slightly, but I hoped they wouldn't notice. Tabitha sat down at the table, her skirt neatly straightened, and looked around as if she were appraising antiques at an auction. You know, Edith, she began, taking the cup from my hands. I saw a very similar set in an antiquity shop the other day. They said it's the kind of thing that's in great demand now. Harold gave it to me for our 20th anniversary, I said. I'm not going to sell it. Of course not. Weber quickly intervened. Tabitha was just pointing out that you have good taste. I nodded silently and sat down across from them. This was the beginning of our usual game of politeness underneath which there were other motives. How's your health, Mother? Weber asked, putting a large piece of casserole on his plate. Do you see a doctor regularly? Twice a year like I'm supposed to. I answered. Dr. Grayson says, I'm in great shape for Miage. But you realize that at your age, things can change overnight, Tabitha said, barely touching her food. My aunt was feeling fine too. And then she fell and broke her hip. She couldn't live on her own after that. Oh, so that's it. A new tactic to scare me with stories of helpless old people. I'm very careful, I said, and I have Myrtle across the street. We look out for each other. Myrtle. Tabitha puckered her lips. She's an old lady herself. What kind of help would she be in an emergency? She's 3 years younger than me, and she drives. I countered. Besides, we both have panic buttons on our phones. Weber and Tabitha looked at each other. I already knew that look. They'd rehearsed this moment. Mum. Weber set his fork aside and covered my hand with his. Tabitha and I are very worried about you. This house is too big for one person. It's expensive to maintain and the stairs are becoming dangerous. I only use the first floor, I said. I go up once a week to air out the rooms. You see, Tabitha exclaimed, you don't even use half the house. It's unsustainable. I sighed and sipped my tea. It was going to be a long day. After lunch, Weber suggested we take a look around the house just to see if everything was okay. I agreed, though I understood the true purpose of the inspection. They walked slowly through the rooms, stopping at every painting, every piece of furniture. This dresser must be valuable, Tabitha asked. running her hand over the polished surface of the antique dresser in the living room. I got it from my grandmother, I answered. I don't know its market value. Maybe we should appraise some of the pieces, Weber suggested. For insurance purposes. My insurance covers the whole property, I said. There's no need for a separate appraisal. They looked at each other again. Something in their looks made me even more wary. When we got to Thescan floor, Tabitha couldn't resist commenting, God, Edith, you're having a hard time climbing those stairs. You're out of breath. I was a little out of breath, but no more than Weber and his extra 20 pounds. I'm fine, I replied. The doctor says that this kind of exercise is good for me at my age. They lingered in Weber's bedroom, which had been untouched since he'd gone off to college 30 years ago. Tabitha surveyed the room with undisguised interest. It would make a wonderful study, she said, or a nursery if we ever have a baby. I didn't say anything. They were both well into their 40s, and the subject of children was a sore subject. I knew they'd tried, but to no avail. Sometimes I thought their obsession with my property was some sort of compensation for their lack of heirs. In my bedroom, Weber stopped in front of painting that hid the safe. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept a nonchalant expression on my face. Has this painting always hung here? He asked casually. Yes, for about 20 years, I answered. Your father bought it at a local art show. He nodded and turned away, but I saw his gaze linger for a moment on the wall next to the painting, where there was a faint trace of a safe. Could he really be guessing? Back downstairs, we sat down in the living room. Tabitha took a clipboard out of her purse and placed it on the table. Edith, we want to show you something, she said with that same luscious smile I hated so much. We found a wonderful place where you'll be comfortable and safe. She turned on her tablet and showed me pictures of Sun Valley, the very nursing home Myrtle had mentioned. Bright rooms, smiling seniors, nurses in perfectly ironed uniforms. There's round-the-clock medical supervision, Tabitha continued, leafing through the pictures. 3 meals a day, a library, and even a pool for water exercises. And it's not far from us, Weber added. We'll be able to visit you every weekend. Just like with my funeral, I thought. Once a week, no more, to keep up appearances. That's very nice of you, I said calmly. But I don't plan to move out of my house. Mum, Weber leaned forward, his voice insistent. You have to think about the future. This house needs constant maintenance. The roof, the garden, the plumbing. It's only going to get more complicated. I'm coping, I replied. I have a gardener. Hokum's once a month. And I call in the handyman when needed. And the money? Tabitha asked bluntly. Your pension can't cover all those expenses. I have savings, I said briefly. And I know how to save. But that money could be spent on taking good care of you, Weber argued. And the house? The house could be sold and you'd have enough for a few years in a good institution. That's it. They finally made the point they'd been leading up to all day. Sell the house. Get rid of me. Get the inheritance in my lifetime. I'm not selling the house, I said firmly. And I'm not moving into a nursing home. This is my home and I'm staying here for the rest of my life. Tabitha's face froze and Weber sighed with feigned patience. Mum, you can't live alone forever. What if you fall? What if you have a stroke or a heart attack? Who's going to help you? I have a panic button, I repeated. Andy, I'm not alone. I have friends. Friends are no substitute for professional care. Tabitha cut her off. Edith, be reasonable. We want what's best for you. The best for who? For me or for yourself? I knew the answer, but I didn't say anything. The rest of the day passed in a tense atmosphere. They tried various ways to convince me that living alone was dangerous and impractical. I stood my ground, And by late afternoon, Tabitha could no longer hide her irritation. Before he left, Weber lingered in the hallway and took my hand again. "Mum, think about it, please," he said quietly. "We're worried about you." "I'll think about it." I lied, knowing I would never willingly agree to their plan. When they left, I locked the door and sank into the chair. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, but from anger. How dare they? How dare my own son try to evict me from the house that his father and I had bought and maintained all my life? I picked up Maisel's phone and dialed Myrtle's number. "Had they left?" she asked instead of greeting me. "Yes, just now," I answered. "How'd it go?" "Exactly as I expected. They want to send me to Sun Valley and sell the house." "Those bastards," said Myrtle, who was usually reserved. "What did you tell them that?" "I didn't agree, of course. But they wouldn't back down, Myrtle. I could see it in their eyes. They were up to something." My 71st birthday was sunny and unexpectedly warm for late October. I woke up early with the first rays of sunlight coming through the loose curtains. Age takes its toll as you sleep less and get up earlier. I liked it though. The morning hours when the whole world was still slumbering gave me special sense of peace and solitude. I didn't have anything special planned for the day. Myrtle promised to stop by with homemade pie. Aldrich would probably call Weber and Tabitha. Well, they're not likely to remember. In recent years, congratulations from her son had come the next day at best, accompanied by lame apologies about the workload at work. Pouring myself a cup of tea, I stepped out onto the back porch. Miss Mulgarden was slowly going to sleep before winter, but a few late roses were still blooming bravely against the south wall of the house. Harold always said those flowers were like me, stubborn and hearty. As I thought about it, I didn't immediately hear the phone ringing. When I realized it, I hurried into the house, almost spilling my tea. "Hello." "Happy birthday, Mom." Weber's voice sounded genuinely cheerful and energetic. "Thank you, son," I replied, not hiding my surprise. "I didn't expect you to remember." "How could I forget?" He sounded a little hurt. "Tabitha and I wanted to stop by today to congratulate you in person. We have a surprise for you." Something in his tone made me wary. He sounded too enthusiastic, like an actor in a cheap commercial. "Surprise?" I asked cautiously. "Yes, and you'll love it," Weber assured me. "We'll be there around 2. Don't plan anything for the afternoon." "Okay." I slowly put the phone down. Surprise. The last time Weber had surprised me, it had been on a familiarization tour trip to Sun Valley. I refused to get out of the car then. And that was the cause of our big fight. I should have called Aldrich, but I didn't want to disturb him. This early dot instead, I dialed Myrtle's number. "Weber called," I said, as soon as she picked it up. "He and Tabitha are coming over tonight, and they say they have a surprise for me." "On your birthday?" Myrtle's voice sounded as suspicious as my thoughts. "That's strange. They don't usually even call." "That's what I'm saying. I don't like this." "Myrtle, do you want me to come over when they're at your place?" "My friend suggested it. I'll tell them I came by to say congratulations." "No." I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. "I'd rather handle it myself. But keep in touch, okay?" After talking to Myrtle, I called Aldrich. He listened to him carefully and suggested I turn on the tape recorder when Weber arrived. "Just in case," he said. I spent the rest of the time before my son arrived tidying up the house. Not because I wanted to impress Tabitha, but just to keep my hands busy and calm my nerves. I dusted off the photos on the mantelpiece, including an old picture of Harold and me holding the newborn Weber. How long ago that was, and how much things had changed. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Not just their car, but several cars. Looking out the window, I saw that in addition to Weber's black SUV, a minivan with the Sun Valley logo had pulled up in front of my house. My heart skipped a beat. So, this was the surprise they had in store. With trembling hands, I pulled the small tape recorder I'd always carried with me lately out of my robe pocket and turned it on the recording. Then I headed for the door, feeling the anger building up inside, pushing out the initial fear. Weber didn't ring the bell, just opened the door with his key and walked in, smiling broadly. He was followed by Tabitha in an elegant grey suit and 2 men in Sun Valley employee uniforms. "Happy birthday, Mum," Weber exclaimed, coming over to give me a hug. I took a step back. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, nodding toward the nursing home staff. "Why are these people here?" Weber's smile became a little strained, but it didn't disappear. "Mum, Tabitha, and I have made a decision. You're moving into Sun Valley today. We've already organized everything. A cozy room overlooking the garden, just the way you like it. They even made a birthday cake in honor of your birthday." I looked at my son, not believing my ears. Did he really think I would just agree and go with them? "I'm not moving anywhere," I said firmly. "This is my home, and I'm staying here." Tabitha stepped forward, her flawless face of fake concern. "Edith, darling, we realize this is a difficult decision, but trust me, it's for your own good. Sun Valley will take much better care of you than you can take care of yourself." "I take care of myself just fine," I replied, feeling the anger rising inside me. "And I didn't consent to the move. You can't just come and take me away like something." Weber exchanged a quick glance with Tabitha, then turned to me again. "Mum, listen. We've noticed lately that you've been finding it increasingly difficult to manage on your own. You've been forgetting things. Sometimes you're confused." "That's a lie." I raised my voice. "I'm perfectly sane, and you know it." Mrs. Winters, one of the Sun Valley employers, stepped forward. "Your son is very concerned about you. In our facility, you will receive all the attention and care you need." I ignored him, looking directly at Weber. "This has nothing to do with taking care of me, does it? It's all about the house and my money." Weber's face flashed, but he quickly pulled himself together. "Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. Your house needs constant care that you can't provide. We want to help." "Help yourself," I parried. "I'm not blind or deaf, Weber. I heard you and Tabitha discussing what you'd do with my house after you got rid of me." Tabitha glanced fearfully at the nursing home staff, then stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. "Edith, you're very upset, right now, and you're saying things that don't make sense. That just proves we're right. You need help." I felt panic rising inside me. They were trying to make me look crazy in front of witnesses. It was part of their plan. "I'm calling Aldrich," I said, pulling out me phone. "Your old lawyer friend." Weber grinned. "Mum, he can't help. I have airport from Dr. Fielding on your condition. He recommends immediate hospitalization in a facility with 24-hour care." "Dr. Fielding?" I was shocked. I had never been to Dr. Fielding. "You don't remember?" Tabitha said softly. "This is further proof that you need help." It was just unbelievable. They fabricated a medical report. I felt my legs give out and I sank into the nearest chair. "I'm not going," I repeated, trying to keep my voice firm. "This is my home, and you have no right to take me away from it against my will." Weber sighed and looked at the Sun Valley staff. "See, she doesn't understand what's going on. Can you help us?" One of the men nodded and stepped forward. "Mrs. Winters, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way, you are moving into our facility today." I couldn't believe this was happening. My own son had brought in strangers to forcibly remove me from my home. I was frantically thinking of what to do. I need to pack, I said finally, trying to buy time. Of course, Mom. Weber sighed in relief. Well, help you. No, I held up my hand. I'll do it myself. Give me half an hour. Tabitha wanted to object, but Weber stopped her. Okay, Mom. Half an hour. Well, wait here. I walked slowly up the stairs to my bedroom, feeling their gazes on my back. As soon as the door closed behind me, I rushed to the phone and dialed Aldrich's number. When he answered, I quickly and quietly explained the situation. They can't do that, he said firmly. I'll come right away. There's no time, I whispered. They're waiting downstairs, and I don't think they're going to let me wait for you. They have a fake medical report. Aldrich was silent for a moment, then said, Listen carefully, Edith. Sometimes it's better to retreat than to win. You go with them now, and I'll act immediately. In a day or two, we'll get you out of there and bring them to justice. At my home, I felt tears coming to my eyes. They'll take it as soon as I leave. They can't do anything to the house without your signature, Aldrich assured me. And you won't sign anything at Sun Valley, no matter what they say. Promise. I promise. I wiped away my tears. Thank you, Aldrich. After the conversation, I opened the safe behind the painting and pulled out the most important documents. The will, Aldrich's power of attorney, medical reports on my health, bank statements. All of these I put in a small purse that I could hide under my clothes. Then I began mechanically folding clothes into an old suitcase. A few dresses, underwear, a warm robe, house slippers. A picture of Harold on the bedside table caught my eye. I picked it up and held it to my chest. What would you do, Harold? It whispered. What would you do with our son? There was no answer, of course. Guti could imagine. What my husband would have said. Take them by stealth, Edith. You've always been smarter than they are. A knock at the door brought me out of my reverie. Mother? Weber's voice sounded impatient. Are you coming soon? Just another minute, I replied quickly, stuffing the picture into my suitcase. When I got downstairs, they were all waiting for me in the hallway. Tabitha was already opening cabinets and pulling out drawers as if she were taking inventory. What are you doing? I asked sharply. She flinched and slammed the drawer shut. Just seeing if you've forgotten anything important. There? It's nothing important to you in my house, I said coldly. Weber picked up my suitcase. Mom, don't start that again. It's all for your own good. My own good? I looked him straight in the eye. Then tell me the truth, Weber. What do you plan to do with my house and car while I'm gone? He hesitated, not expecting a direct question. The house will need Tobe maintained. Maybe Tabitha and I will move in here for a while to keep an eye on it. And the car? I insisted. Why do you want my car? It's in the garage and you've hardly driven it lately. There's no point in having a good car just sitting there. Tabitha interjected. We could use it while you're resting. Resting? It grinned bitterly. Call things what they are, Tabitha. You want to get rid of Mezzo, you can have my property. That's not true, Weber exclaimed. But his face serened, betraying the lie. One of the Sun Valley employees coughed. We should get going, Mrs. Winters. There's a birthday dinner waiting for you at the facility. I slowly looked around my house. The living room with the worn but cozy sofa. The kitchen where Harold and Andy had spent so many evenings talking. The pictures on the walls. Each one a piece of my life. Was this really the last time I'd see it all? Okay, I said finally. I'll go. But no, this isn't over. Tabitha rolled her eyes, but Weber just nodded, clearly satisfied that I didn't have to use force. House and car keys. He held out his hand. I slowly pulled a bunch of keys out of my pocket and handed them to him, keeping only the small mailbox key which he didn't notice. "You'll like it at Sun Valley," one of the employees said, picking up my suitcase. "We have great facilities for people your age, my age." As if being 71 was a judgment call, as if I wasn't Apperson anymore, just an old lady to be gotten rid of. As I walked out of the house, I cast one last glance over my shoulder. Tabitha was already sitting in my favorite chair, and Weber was standing at the window, surveying the room. They weren't even trying to hide their impatience to take possession of my house. The Sun Valley minivan was clean and smelled of antiseptic. I was helped into the back seat, and an employee who introduced himself as Paul buckled my seatbelt like I was a child. "Don't worry, Mrs. Winters," he said with a professional smile. "Many of our residents are resistant at first, but they get used to it and even thank their families for their decision." I said nothing, staring out the window at my house, which grew smaller as the car drove away. Weber and Tabitha stood on the porch, waving goodbye to me with fake smiles. As soon as the minivan turned the corner, I was sure they ran back into the house to begin its inspection. The drive to Sun Valley took about 30 minutes. All that time I sat in silence, pondering my next steps. Aldridge had promised to help. But how long would it take? A day? A week? Issued at the thought of what Weber and Tabitha could do in that time. Sun Valley turned out to be exactly as I'd imagined. A large 3-story red brick building surrounded by a manicured but featureless garden. At the entrance hung a sign that read, "Welcome to your new home." Home. How ironic. This sterile, drug-smelling, sanitized complex would never be my home. We were greeted in the lobby by a middle-aged woman in a strict suit with a director name tag on her chest. "Mrs. Winters," she exclaimed with a wide smile. "Welcome to Sun Valley. We are so happy to have you join our large family." A big family, another lie. I'd seen enough of this place's promotion arbitrage to know there was no family here. Just customers and staff doing their jobs for money. "Your son has organized everything," the director continued, leading me down the hall. "You will have a beautiful room overlooking the garden, 3 meals a day, daily entertainment, and of course, qualified medical care." "What about my freedom?" I asked. "Is that included in the package?" The director hesitated for a moment, but quickly restored her professional smile. "We have a very liberal regime, Mrs. Winters. You are free to roam the compound. You must be accompanied or authorized in writing by your guardian to leave the compound." "My guardian?" I stopped. "I don't have a guardian. I am a capable adult." That principal exchanged quick glances with Paul, who was accompanying us. "Of course, Mrs. Winters. I was referring to your son who has all the paperwork. My son has no right to make decisions for me," I said firmly. "I didn't sign any documents giving him that right." "Well, that's a question for the lawyers." The director obviously wanted to close the subject. "Now, let me show you your room." The room was small but clean. A bed, a bedside table, a closet, a table with a chair, and a small armchair by the window. The window did face the garden, but it was barred for security, as the headmistress explained. "Dinner is at 6 in the common dining room," she said, leaving me alone. "Now rest. Get used to your new surroundings." As soon as the door closed behind her, I sank down on the bed and finally let myself cry. Tears streamed down my cheeks, washing away the tension and fear of the last few hours. I cried not out of self-pity, but out of anger and frustration. How could my son do this to him? How could life turn out to be such a betrayal? Wiping away my tears, I pulled my cell phone out of my secret pocket and dialed Aldrich's number. He answered after the first beep as if he'd been waiting for my call. "Edith, where are you?" "At Sun Valley," I answered quietly. They brought me here. As planned. I've already contacted Judge Harrison. Aldrich said he'll sign a release order for you. But it'll take a day or two. A day or two, I repeated in a lifeless voice. In that time, Weber and Tabitha would have my whole house upside down. The main thing is they can't sell it. Aldrich reminded me. We have all the paperwork. Remember? I nodded, though Heckle didn't see it. Yes, I remember. But I'm scared, Aldrich. This place, it's like a prison in here. Hold on, Edith. His voice sounded sure. We'll get you out of there. I promise. After the conversation, I tucked the phone back into my secret pocket and walked to the window. The sun was already slipping toward the horizon, coloring the sky orange. Somewhere out there, a few miles away, was my real home. The one I'd built and cherished all my life. And now it was being ruled by strangers. I pressed my palm against the cold glass. It was probably the worst day of my life. The day my own son betrayed me for money and possessions. But I wasn't going to give up. Somehow I had to get out of here and get back what was rightfully mine. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Mrs. Winters. A young nurse came into the room. It's time for dinner and we have a special cake in honor of your birthday. Birthday? I completely forgot it was my birthday. 71 years old. The age when you think you're past the worst of it. I was wrong. I'm coming, I said, pulling myself together. The nurse escorted me to the dining room where other residents were, already sitting at long tables. Elderly men and women with blank awe. Confused looks. Some were eating on their own. Others were being helped by the staff. In the center of the room was a table with a large cake decorated with candles. The numbers 71 were lined with cream. Attention, we have a new resident, announced the director, leading me over to the cake. And today is her birthday. Let's all congratulate Mrs. Winters. A few people clapped languidly, while the rest of us continued to eat without paying attention to what was going on. Make a wish and blow out the candles. The principal smiled. It looked at the candle lights flickering in the semi-darkness of the dining room. A wish? I had only one wish. To go home and punish those who had sent me here. I took a deep breath and blew out the candles with one determined exhale. The night in Sun Valley was endless. The hard bunk, strange noises from Thelway, and disturbing thoughts kept me awake. I lay staring at the ceiling and replayed the events of the past day in my head. My own son and his wife had brought me to this nursing home, as if I were an unwanted thing that it was time to get rid of. The pain of betrayal was unbearable, but I didn't allow myself to get discouraged. The time for tears had passed. Now was the time for action. The first rays of dawn were barely touching the window pane when I quietly pulled my cell phone out of my secret pocket and dialed Aldrich's number. He answered almost immediately as if he'd been up all night. Edith, how are you? His voice sounded concerned. Alive, I answered in a whisper, so as not to attract the attention of the staff. What about the papers? I'm meeting with Judge Harrison at 10 o'clock in the morning. Aldrich said he'll sign an order for your immediate release. I'll be at Sun Valley by noon. They may not comply, I warned. They have some documents from Weber. Forged documents, Aldrich said confidently. I've already contacted Dr. Fielding. He's shocked. He's never seen you or signed any reports. Weber and Tabitha were in big trouble. A sense of relief came over me, but I knew this was only the beginning of the battle. What about the house? Are they there yet? Yes, Aldrich paused. Myrtle called. Saw them moving some stuff in last night. I guess they decided to move in right away. I gripped the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. They didn't waste any time. Well, they're in for a surprise, I said. And for the first time in 24 hours, I felt something resembling satisfaction. Activate phase 2 of the plan. Aldrich. It's already on. I heard the smile in his voice. The paperwork. Went to Thebink and the registry office this morning. It'll be official by tonight. Thank you, I said sincerely. I don't know what I'd do without you. That's what old friends are for, he said simply. Hang in there, Edith. I'll get you out of there soon. After the conversation, I hid my phone and began to prepare fourth day ahead. Despite my age and the stress I'd been through, I felt a surge of energy. The plan Aldrich and I had been working on for the past few years was finally set in motion. At 7:30, there was a knock on the door and Annis came in. A young woman with a tired face and kind eyes. Good morning, Mrs. Winters. She smiled, placing the breakfast tray on the bedside table. How did you sleep in your new place? Disgusting, I answered honestly. The nurse's smile became a little strained. That's normal. The first few days are always hard. You'll get used to it. You'll see. I don't think I'll have that opportunity, I said, sipping the tasteless tea from a plastic cup. I didn't plan on sticking around. The nurse, name tag read, Lauren. Saiden sat down on the edge of my bed. Mrs. Winters, I understand your feelings. Many new residents struggle at first, but believe me, your family only wishes to you well. I grinned bitterly. My family wants only one thing for me, to get out of my house and get my money. Lauren shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, not knowing what to say. Finally, she mumbled something about group therapy at 10 o'clock and hurried out of the room. I forced myself to eat some tasteless oatmeal. I needed strength for the day ahead. After breakfast, I cleaned myself up, dressing in my best blouse and pants. If I was going to leave this place with my head held high, I wanted to look accordingly. At 10 o'clock, I was escorted to the lounge, a large room with worn armchairs and a television where other seniors were already gathered. Some were dozing, others staring aimlessly into space. A middle-aged woman who introduced herself as the group therapy coordinator wavering to engage everyone in conversation about the week's plans. I sat down in the far corner closer to the exit and waited. At 11:30, while therapy was still going on, the director of Sun Valley entered the room with a concerned look on her face. She glanced around the room and noticing me, walked straightward. Emmy, Mrs. Winters, she said quietly, leaning toward my chair. You're expected in my office. Who? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Your lawyer, she said the last word with obvious distaste. I rose slowly and followed her down the long hallway. My heart beat faster with anticipation. Aldrich hadn't let me down. Aldrich was already sitting in the principal's office, impeccable in his tweed suit with a folder of documents in his lap. Next to him was a man in a sheriff's uniform. Edith Aldrich rose to hug me. Are you all right? I am now, I replied, feeling the tension of the last 24 hours begin to let go. The director of Sun Valley stood at the door with her arms crossed over her chest. Minus Mr. Pierce, I understand your concern, but Mrs. Winters is here on the authority of her son, who has all necessary documents, forged documents. Aldrich interrupted her, pulling papers out of a folder. I have a written statement from Dr. Fielding that he never examined Mrs. Winters and never signed any report that was incapacitated, and also an order from Judge Harrison for the immediate release of Mrs. Winters and the voiding of all documents signed on her behalf by Weber Winters. He held out the papers to the principal, who took them with trembling hands. Yeah, I didn't know, she mumbled, taking a quick look at the documents. We were relying on information provided by Mrs. Winters' son. You held an elderly woman against her will based on documents you didn't even check. Aldrich's voice was icy, cold. That's a serious violation of the law, Miss Parker. The director turned pale. We acted in accordance with our standard procedures. Your standard procedure as in called incarcerating citizens without due process. Aldrich raised an eyebrow. I wonder what the licensing board would have to say about that. The threat had an immediate effect. The director immediately changed her tone. Of course, we will prepare Mrs. Winters for discharge immediately. I'm very sorry about this misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, interjected. It was a willful act by my son and his wife. And you were a complicit. The director opened her mouth to object, but changed her mind and just nodded. I'll have your things brought here. Half an hour later, I was in Aldrich's car, clutching my old suitcase tightly. The nightmare of Sun Valley was behind me, but the ordeal of meeting Weber and Tabitha was no less daunting. Where to now? Aldrich asked, pulling onto the main road. Home? I said firmly. It was time to show my son what a real surprise was. Aldrich shook his head doubtfully. I'm not sure that's such a good idea, Edith. They'll be furious. Let them. I looked out the window at the passing landscape. I want to see their faces when they know the truth. Aldrich sighed, but he didn't argue. He knew me well enough to know that once I'd made up my mind, it was impossible to change my mind. On the way, he told me the details of our plan, which was already in motion. The trust is officially registered. The house now belongs to him, and you are the beneficiary with a lifetime right of occupancy. The bank has already received all the documents and has blocked your accounts for any transactions except those authorized by you personally or by me as your trustee. And the car? I asked. Sold it a week ago to Vintage Auto. The money has been transferred to a new account that Weber doesn't know about. I nodded, feeling my lips spread into a smile. Years of planning had finally borne fruit. Is the apartment ready? Completely. Aldrich confirmed. Furnished, utilities hooked up. You can move in today. It was another part of our plan. A small but cozy apartment in a new building across town. Bought in my name through a shell company Weber didn't know about. A place where I could live in peace if the situation with the house became unbearable. It had been a week since I'd moved into my new apartment. The quiet neighborhood, the modern house with an elevator, and the convenient layout all made my life much more comfortable than in the old two-story house on Oak Street. I gradually got used to the new place, arranging my things and photos in a thoughtful order. Only Harold's portrait took pride of place on the bedroom dresser, where I could see it every morning when I woke up. I was just finishing breakfast that morning when Aldrich called. Good morning, Edith, he said, his voice as cheerful as ever. How did you sleep in your new place? Better than I expected, I replied, sipping my tea. Surprisingly, I like it here. Quiet, no creaking floorboards or ghosts of the past. I'm glad to hear that. He sounded genuinely pleased. I have news. The court has scheduled a preliminary hearing on your suit for next Wednesday. Weber got the notice last night. I felt my heart clench. Despite everything that had happened, the thought of a legal confrontation with my own son still hurt. Had he reacted in any way? I asked. Oh yes, Aldrich grinned. He called me and yelled at Meffa about 15 minutes. Threatened a countersuit, promised to prove you were incompetent, and swore he'd never pay back the money, which he said was a gift, not a loan. Sounds like Weber, aside. And Tabitha, she hasn't been in touch, but I've heard from mutual friends that she's furious and blames Weber for everything. They say they had a big fight after the base visit. I shook my head. Their marriage had always seemed to me to be based more on mutual advantage than on love. No wonder it started to burst apart as soon as their financial plans fell apart. What should we do now? I asked. Nothing. Much, Aldrich replied. I've prepared all the documents. We have receipts signed by Weber for a total of $45,000. All of them are legally drawn up with indication of the terms of return, which have long passed. The case is crystal clear. He could claim that I forced him to sign those receipts. I suggested, let him try. Aldrich said with confidence. Every time he asked for money, you insisted on a receipt precisely because you foresaw this situation. That shows your foresight and capacity, not the other way around. After the conversation, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. It was a clear day with a light fall breeze. Perfect weather for an elderly woman who had been cooped up for too long. I put on a light coat and set out to explore the neighborhood. Not far from the house was a cozy park with a pond where ducks swam. I sat on a bench watching their measured movement on the water. These creatures knew no worries about inheritance, betrayal of loved ones, or litigation. Perhaps that was their wisdom. Mrs. Winters, a voice behind me made me flinch. When I turned around, I saw Tabitha. She looked gaunt with shadows under her eyes and her always perfectly styled hair in a sloppy ponytail. Tabitha, I nodded, trying to stay calm. I didn't expect to see you here. Yeah, I was looking for you. She fidgeted with the strap of her bag. The concierge at your house didn't want to tell me where you were, but I saw you coming out and followed. You followed me? I raised an eyebrow. That's not very decent. I need to talk to you. She lowered herself onto the bench next to me without waiting for an invitation. It's very important. I waited silently for her to continue. Tabitha always liked dramatic pauses. This lawsuit, she finally began. Are you really asking us for $45,000? Not you, but Weber, I clarified. He's the one who took the money from me and signed the receipts. But yes, I'm demanding repayment. With interest, it's up to $53,000. Tabitha turned pale. We don't have that kind of money. We spent all our savings on the renovation of our house, expecting. She stopped. She paused, hoping to get my house and sell it. I finished for her. Yes, I'm aware of your plans. I've been around for years. You don't understand, she said with a pleading tone in her voice. Weber lost his job 3 months ago. He was afraid to tell you. We're barely making ends meet. If you make us pay this money, we'll lose the house. I looked closely at my sister-in-law. In the 15 years we'd known each other, she had never once shown me genuine warmth or concern. There was always only a fake smile and a calculating look, assessing what I could get from my old mother-in-law. Why should I believe you? I asked bluntly. You and Weber have been lying to me for years. You planned to send me to a nursing home against my will using forged documents. You wanted to deprive me of the house that Harold and I bought long before you came into our family. Tabitha lowered her eyes. I know what we did was terrible, but we were desperate. The bank threatened to foreclose on our house if we didn't pay off the loan. Weber couldn't find a job after he was laid off. And she stammered. My receptionist's salary wasn't even enough to make the monthly payments. And instead of being honest with me about your problems and asking for help, you decided to get rid of me and take everything I have. I shook my head. That's not desperation, Tabitha. That's greed and meanness. I know, she sobbed suddenly. I know. It was my idea. I convinced Weber that you couldn't live alone much longer anyway, and that we would just hasten the inevitable. Her tears didn't move me. For too many years, I'd watched her manipulate my son, playing the role of loving wife or helpless victim of circumstance. What do you want from me, Tabitha? I asked tiredly. Why did you seek me out? She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara. I came to ask you to withdraw the suit, to give us a chance to get back on our feet. Maybe we could pay off the debt gradually in small installments. Where's Weber? Why hasn't he come forward with this request himself? Tabitha looked away. He's too proud. He says he'd rather declare bankruptcy than ask for your forgiveness. That sounded like my son. Always too proud to admit his mistakes. Always ready to blame anyone but himself. So he sent you to do his dirty work? I grinned. Typical Weber. He doesn't know I'm here, Tabitha admitted. He'd be furious if he found out. That surprised me. Maybe their marriage was really coming apart more than I'd realized. Well, I said, rising from the bench, tell Weber. I expect him in court on Wednesday. If he has a repayment offer, have him come there with it. Or have him call Aldrich. Please, Edith. Tabitha grabbed my hand. At least think about it. For Weber's sake. He is your son after all. I pulled my hand free. He stopped being my son the moment he decided to send me to a nursing home by fraud. Goodbye, Tabitha. I walked away without looking back, feeling her gaze on my back. Inside, I felt empty and cold. I felt no gloating or satisfaction, just fatigue and the deafening pain of realizing I no longer had a family. When I got home, I called Aldrich and told him about the meeting. Don't believe a word, she says, he said firmly. It's just another manipulation. They're trying to get at your maternal feelings. I don't believe it, I replied. But what if Weber really did lose his job? It doesn't change anything. Aldrich's voice became softer. Edith, even if it's true, remember what they did to you. They didn't come to you with an honest conversation about their problems. They tried to take away everything you had, including your freedom and your dignity. He was right, of course, but a mother's heart is a strange thing. Even after everything Weber had done, some part of me still worried about him. I'm not withdrawing the lawsuit, I said firmly. But perhaps we could offer them a payment plan if they acknowledge the debt. A reasonable compromise, Aldrich agreed. I'll have the appropriate documents ready for the hearing. The morning of the trial was overcast. Heavy clouds covered the sky, threatening to rain. Aldrich picked me up at 9 o'clock sharp and went to the courthouse in the center of town. Nervous? He asked as we walked up the wide steps. A little, I admitted. I'd never been to court before. It'll be all right. Aldrich assured me. It's just a preliminary hearing. The judge will review the documents and will probably suggest that the parties reach a settlement. If Weber refuses, the main hearing will be scheduled. The court corridor was crowded with people, attorneys in smart suits, clients with tense faces, baifs. Aldrich led me confidently through the crowd to Ferrite Room. Weber and Tabitha were already there. My son sat stone-faced, staring straight ahead. Tabitha was nervously rubbing the strap of her bag, avoiding my gaze. Next to them sat a young man in an expensive seat, apparently their lawyer. We took seats on the opposite side of the room. Aldrich spread out the papers in front of him, occasionally casting confident glances in my direction. I tried to look calm, though my insides were clenching from the confrontation ahead. Case number 234.18. Winters versus Winters, the clerk announced, and everyone stood up as the judge, a stern, middle-aged woman with an attentive gaze, entered. Be seated, she said, taking her seat. Now, we have a suit to collect a debt of $45,000 plus interest. The plaintiff is Edith Winters and the defendant is Weber Winters. Introduce yourself, please. Aldrich stood up. Aldrich Pierce, representing the plaintiff. James Foster, representing the defendant, said Weber's young attorney. The judge looked over the documents, then looked up. Mr. Pierce, state the nature of the lawsuit. Aldrich spoke clearly and confidently as he presented the proof of debt. 10 receipts signed by Weber over the past 10 years with exact dates, amounts, and repayment terms. None of these sums have been repaid despite repeated reminders. He finished. We demand full repayment with accrued interest totaling $53,480. The judge nodded and turned to Weber Slayer. Mr. Foster, what is the defendant's position? The young lawyer nervously adjusted his tie. Your Honor, my client does not deny the fact of receiving money from his mother, but believes that they were gifts, not loans. The receipts were signed under pressure in a situation of emotional blackmail. In addition, the plaintiff was already showing signs of cognitive impairment at the time of the money transfer, which calls into question her ability to understand the nature of these financial transactions. I could barely keep from snorting. Cognitive edelim. That was a very weak argument, especially considering the recent scandal of the fake medical report. The judge seemed to think the same thing. Mr. Foster, do you have medical documentation that the plaintiff was incapacitated at the time of these agreements? No, Your Honor, but I have a medical report confirming Mrs. Winter's full capacity. Aldrich intervened, holding out another document. The report of Dr. Grayson, her physician for 15 years, dated last month. The judge scrutinized the document, then shifted her gaze to Weber. Mr. Winters, you claim you signed these receipts under duress. However, there are 10 documents made at different times over a period of 10 years. Are you saying that you were under pressure for 10 years and could not refuse? Weber looked at me for the first time, his gaze full of cold fury. Your Honor, my mother was always manipulative. She would only give me money if I signed those papers. I didn't think she'd ever ask for it back. It was just a quirk of hers. A quirk? The judge raised an eyebrow. Minus Mr. Winters. These papers are legally drafted with exact return dates that are long past. That doesn't sound like a quirk. Weber's attorney intervened again. Your Honor, my client is in dire financial straits right now. He lost his job 3 months ago and does not have the ability to pay this amount of money. That's irrelevant to the merits of the claim, the judge observed. The question is whether the defendant recognizes the debt. There was a pause. Weber clenched his fists, his face turning red. Finally, he gritted his teeth. I admit I took money from her, but I can't give it back. I just didn't have it. The judge nodded. In that case, I suggest the parties consider a settlement agreement with installment payments. Mr. Pierce, is your client ready for that option? Aldrich looked at me and I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We're ready to discuss a payment plan. Good. Judge made a note. I'll give you 30 minutes to negotiate terms. If you don't come to an agreement, I'll set the main hearing for next month. Aldrich and I went into the small conference room. We were soon joined by Weber, Tabitha, and their attorney. So, Aldrich began when everyone was seated. We're willing to consider a payment plan for up to 5 years with monthly installments. We don't have that kind of money, Weber snapped. I'm unemployed. Tabitha makes a pittance. That's not our problem, Aldrich said calmly. You took the money, you signed the receipts. Now you have to pay it back. You don't understand, Tabitha intervened. We could lose the house. We'd have to declare bankruptcy. I watched the scene in silence. Weber never once looked me in the eye, speaking only to Aldrich as if I wasn't in the room. Maybe you could sell the house and buy something smaller, Aldrich suggested. Or take on an extra job. Easy for me to say, Weber exclaimed. At my age, no one wants to hire an insurance inspector, and our house is already mortgaged to the bank. I finally decided to intervene. Weber, look at me. He looked up reluctantly. They were a mixture of anger, fear, and something else, shame. I'm offering you a choice, I said calmly. The first option will make a 10-year payment schedule with the minimum monthly payments you can afford. Option 2. Take your house as collateral. You can't take our house. Weber was outraged. I can. I was adamant. The judge is clearly on my side. If we go to the main hearing, I'll win the case, get a writ of execution, and the bailiffs will seize your property, including the house. Weber's lawyer whispered something in his ear. My son turned evemperor. It's blackmail, he said. No, it's business, I replied. You're fond of saying that money can't smell. Well, here's a lesson in fiscal responsibility. Tabitha sobbed into her handkerchief. Weber looked like he was about to have a stroke. Their lawyer was flailing his arms helplessly. All right. Weber finally hissed. Give me your payment schedule, but remember, it's over between us. You're not my mother anymore. Those words should have hurt me, but I felt only relief. It was like a heavy weight had been lifted from Miss Holder's. Whatever you say, I said calmly. You stopped being a son to meth moment you decided to send me to a nursing home against my will. An hour later, all the papers were signed. According to the settlement agreement, Weber and Tabitha were to pay me $500 monthly for 10 years. In case of delinquency of more than 30 days, I had the right to demand the entire amount immediately and go to the bailiffs. As well as the courthouse, it began to rain. Aldrich opened his umbrella, sheltering me. Are you all right? He asked anxiously. Yeah, I replied, watching Weber and Tabitha hurry to their car without looking back. It's weird, but I feel free. You are free, Aldrich smiled. Free from manipulation, from guilt, from toxic relationships. You can live for yourself now. Live for yourself. The thought was both frightening and exciting. At 71, I suddenly found myself on the threshold of a new life. Free of the burden of the past and obligations to ungrateful relatives. Where to now? Aldrich asked as we got into the car. Home, I answered. To my new apartment. I want to put the kettle on and just sit in silence. At home, the first thing I did was to change into a comfortable robe and slippers. Then I made tea and settled down. In a chair by the window, watching the rain drumming on the glass. I had an old photo album on my lap, the only thing from the past I decided to keep. I flicked through the pages, looking at pictures from different years. Here was Harold and me, young and happy, on the porch of the house we had just bought. Here's little Weber taking his first steps, holding on to my finger. Here he is walking to first grade with a huge bouquet and satchel. Here's his college graduation. Looking at these pictures, I felt no bitterness or regret, just a quiet acceptance that life doesn't always turn out the way we plan. Children grow up and become strangers. Loved ones betray, but it's not the end. I closed the album and walked to the window. The rain had stopped and the sun was breaking through the thinning clouds. Somewhere out there on the other side of town, Weber and Tabitha were walking back to their foreclosed house, discussing how they would pay off the debt. Maybe they were cursing me. Maybe Tabitha was blaming Weber for everything. Or maybe they finally realized they dug themselves into this hole. I didn't care. I did what I had to do. Not out of revenge, but out of a sense of justice. They tried to take everything from me. My home, my money, my freedom, my dignity. They got nothing but a debt that would take 10 years to pay off. The doorbell rang. Myrtle stood on the doorstep, with a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates. Aldrich called, said the trial went well. She smiled, figured it was worth celebrating. I let my friend in, feeling my lips stretch into a smile. You know, I said, pulling out my glasses. Tonight, for the first time in a long time, I feel like the future could be good. Of course it will, Myrtle poured the wine. You've got a new apartment, money in your account, no responsibilities. You can do anything you want.